11 personnel. This is the touchdown play that won the Rams the Super Bowl in 2022 against the Bengals. It's a simple but effective play call using 11 personnel, Sean McVay's favorite and most used personnel package. This play was a play action pass to Cooper Kupp on the right side, who caught a back shoulder fade against one-on-one coverage, giving the Rams a lead over the Bengals that they would not relinquish. It's called 11 personnel because the offense has one running back and one tight end on the field. That's what the two numbers represent. Around 59% of NFL plays this year have been called from 11 personnel. It's the league's bread and butter. It's used by far more than any other personnel package in the league. Each play will have 5 offensive linemen, 1 quarterback, and some combination of 5 running backs, tight ends, or receivers. This combination is referred to as the personnel package. There are 16 combinations of them, and they each have different strengths and weaknesses due to the height, weight, strength, and skill set of these different position players, running backs, tight ends, and receivers. After each play, the offense is allowed to make substitutions and send somebody off of the field who's currently on the field and swap him out with somebody from the sideline to change their personnel package. They might do this to create a mismatch against the defense's current personnel package that's on the field, or to otherwise change their strategy for how they try attacking the defense's scheme. The margin of victory in NFL games is very small, so something as small as having a different personnel package can mean the difference between winning and losing. There are a few reasons 11 personnel is used so often in the NFL. First of all, having both a running back and tight end allow for running plays. The tight end provides some extra blocking capability. But also, you've got 3 receivers and a tight end on the field, which allows for passing plays. This means that 11 personnel is flexible. The offense has many play call options and keeps the defense on their toes, having to respect the offense's ability to credibly run and pass. Importantly, the offense can run and pass without making substitutions, which otherwise would slow down the pace of play. We call this tempo. If an offense is having momentum and being successful, then playing with up-tempo can be an advantage. Another reason 11 personnel is great is because with more passing threats on the field, receivers and tight ends, it forces the defense to have a lighter box. The box refers to the defensive linemen and the players who line up directly behind them within about 5 yards. Players in this location on the field are more effective at stopping the run because they're close. They're in good position to be able to get involved quickly. 7 players in the box is pretty balanced, and it's effective against both running and passing plays. 8 or more would be considered heavy, a heavy box. It's good against stopping the run because they're right there in that prime spot. 6 or fewer would be considered a light box. You'll typically see this in situations where the defense feels they need to protect against the pass, but this is also creating a vulnerability against the run. So the reason 11 personnel is more likely to create a lighter box is because the defense has more passing threats on the field, especially if the offense chooses to line up in what we call a spread formation, wide across the field instead of tight in close proximity to the ball. And the reason that a lighter box is beneficial for running is because the offense has a similar number of running blockers. They might still have 1 or 2 fewer, but if the blockers win their blocks, then the running back can typically make a good read or, maybe win one matchup against a linebacker and run for some pretty good yards. Another reason 11 personnel is used so frequently is because it's the optimal package for modern NFL talent that's coming out of college right now. We're seeing a lot of athletic tight ends like Brock Bowers, Tyler Warren, and also pass-catching running backs like Travion Henderson and RJ Harvey. Teams want to utilize as best they can the talent that they're able to draft. And because this skill set that's coming out of college, NFL teams will tend to adapt their strategies as a result. However, things are changing a little bit with 11 personnel. Its usage increased from below 40% in the early 2010s to above 60% just a couple years ago, but it's now decreasing by about 3% each year. Why? Because defenses are using more nickel coverage, which lessens the advantage of 11 personnel. Nickel coverage refers to a personnel package on the defensive side where you have an extra cornerback on the field. A typical standard base defense will have 7 defensive linemen and linebackers. You might have 4 linemen and 3 linebackers. That would be a 4-3, or the opposite, which would be a 3-4. But a nickel coverage would remove one of the linebackers and replace him with a cornerback, who we call a nickel corner. Cornerbacks tend to be a little bit smaller, but faster and more effective against pass coverage. So because more nickel is being used on defense, it's making heavier formations with more running backs and tight ends, more attractive for offenses because those players are bigger and they tend to be more of an advantage against these smaller cornerbacks. Also, The tight end position has become more popular and more athletic draft classes are coming out of college, shifting the usage in NFL, making more 2 and 3 tight end personnel packages popular. And another reason for the decline is that 11 personnel defensive strategies are on tape, more than they ever have been, which is making it easier to defend. Teams know how to protect against 11 personnel. As a result, other personnel packages like 12 personnel are increasing each year, but we'll talk more about those in a moment. Because for the moment, 11 personnel is still used more than any other personnel package, and there are some teams like the Titans and Rams who use it significantly more than the average team. Why do the Rams use it so much? Because it's core to McVay's offensive system. He chooses to use formations, motion, and alignment to disguise runs and passes, and to create advantages instead of using different personnel packages, which is what some coaches choose to do. It's just a different coaching philosophy. Let's take a look at a couple McVay play examples. Here's a play from 11 personnel with our 1 running back and 1 tight end on the field, and it could look something like this. Trips right refers to there being 3 receivers on the right side of the field. You might even call this tray right, which just simply means that the tight end is lined up in line on the line of scrimmage right next to the offensive lineman. Z fly jet refers to our Z receiver, who is the outermost lined up receiver on the strength side of the formation usually with the tight end. Fly jet is his specific responsibility. It's a motion, something he's going to do before the ball is snapped. He's going to run all the way across the field, line up here, and then 28 zone is the actual play call. So 2 in the 28 refers to the number of our player. In this case, it's the running back, number 2. 8 refers to the running gap that he's being instructed to run into. So 2, 4, 6, 8. This is the 8 hole, so 28, our running back is going to run over here. On the other side, it looks like that. So this is 28 zones, meaning we know this is a zone running play. That's instructions for the offensive line. In a zone blocking scheme, they're moving horizontally. They take a lateral step to the right, and then they're expected to block the person in the gap on the right side. They have different rules that they're expected to do depending on where the defensive linemen line up. So in this case, what might happen is this left guard, combo block, this defensive tackle, and then whichever one gets him under control, the other one will move up to the second layer and block a linebacker. The left tackle will just down block this defensive end because there's nobody else around him. The right guard will likely just lateral step and block this 3-tech defensive tackle by himself. And then the right tackle and tight end will combo block this defensive end. And again, one of them will move up to the second layer to make a second block. And then our Z motion comes around to the back, more so as a distraction, but also could pick up any defenders that are rushing off from the backside. So this is a good example of a running play run out of 11 personnel. But what's really interesting about this is that a completely different play could be called out of this exact same personnel and formation. So what Sean McVay might do is call a play like trips right, Z fly jet, 28 zone, boot left cross. So the first part is all the exact same. Trips right, Z fly jet, 28 zone, but the boot left cross indicates that it's a bootleg play. So it's actually a fake run. The quarterback is going to do a fake handoff and then boot out to the left side. Cross instructs the receivers on the passing concept, the route concept that they're going to run. Or a Z receiver might run something like a go route. Our X receiver might run a deep post, and then our F receiver, our slot receiver, might run a deep cross in this case. This type of play might be effective against a couple different types of coverage. For example, if the defense is running a 2-man high, the weakness is right in the deep middle. So this deep post might be effective there. But if it's a cover 3, then this crossing route might be open underneath because this safety is going to go deep and follow that deep post, which is going to create some space underneath. So it gives the quarterback a couple different options depending on the type of coverage being played. But imagine that first running play is called in the first quarter on the first drive. Later on in the second quarter, this offense comes out in the same personnel, the same formation. The defense doesn't know for sure what play call they're going to call. But if the offense had success running that play, maybe they had a 5-yard, 7-yard gain in the first quarter, the defense might want to cheat a little bit when they start seeing the fake handoff and they see the lateral movement of the offensive line. They might start to kind of cheat toward this side of the field, hoping that they'll make a play on the ball carrier, creating a pretty good opportunity for the quarterback to boot out here and maybe find some extra open space where these linebackers have vacated. This is the strategy of the NFL, and it's also the reason that having an effective run game is important for the passing game. You'll hear broadcasters say that teams need to establish the run. That's what this means. Okay, so another reason that 11 personnel is used by the Rams so much is because of their roster. They have 2 elite receivers in Puka Nacua and Devontae Adams. So if you have the 2 of them on the field with another receiver, and a tight end, you create a matchup nightmare for the defense. They've got 4 receivers to account for, which already is quite a lot, with 2 of them being particularly effective, elite receivers. It's too many passing threats to cover. So this system leverages their strength. The tight ends on the roster, Tyler Higbee and Davis Allen, are good blocking tight ends, and they can run pretty effective intermediate seam routes, but you wouldn't consider them elite tight ends compared to some of the others in the league. So if you used a personnel package a lot like 12, where you'd have 2 tight ends on the field, that means you'd have to remove one of the receivers, which could be effective. But again, they're just trying to maximize the strengths of their roster. Lastly, Kyren Williams, their running back, is an excellent pass catcher, which is crucial for 11 personnel schemes. If you think back to Todd Gurley in 2018, who was also on McVay's team during their first Super Bowl run, he's a great example of another productive PPR fantasy pass catching running back who dominated not just in the run game, but catching passes out of the backfield. So McVay always likes having an effective pass catching running back as well. So the reason a team might use specific personnel packages more than others has to do with their roster strengths and their coach's philosophy. If you like this type of content, then you'll probably love my 2025 team guide, which not only shows the top personnel packages for each team, but also a ton of interesting and specific things to look for when watching each team in the NFL on TV. Link in the description below. 12 personnel. This is where we have 1 running back and 2 tight ends, and then the remaining 2 skill players are receivers. It's used less than 11 personnel, but its usage is increasing league-wide over the last few years. In 2022, it was used on 18% of play calls, and in 2025 so far, it's up to 24%, which is actually a pretty significant increase. We already talked a little bit about the reason why this is happening. It's because defenses are increasingly using nickel coverage, which is creating an advantage for teams to use bigger, heavier, stronger tight ends. Shifting towards this heavier personnel package is an advantage because these players can bully the lighter players on the defense. They're more physically imposing. But another reason 12 personnel is effective is because it adds more flexibility for the running game. More tight ends equals better run blocking, while still having passing threats because, of course, tight ends can catch. Specifically, 12 personnel is great for power running teams. We would also call this gap running. So we showed an example before of a zone run where the offensive line moves laterally across the field. Zone running is a little bit more vertical, and the running back is expected to run through a specific gap, and the offense will send extra run blocking talent into that gap. Let's take a look at an example. So a play call might be something like ace right, Y off, 28 power. Ace right refers to a single running back in the backfield ace. Right is the side of the field where we have our strength lined up. Y off refers to our Y tight end being lined up off the line of scrimmage. When we have 2 tight ends, usually the other one is labeled as U. That's his position label. Our Z receiver is the one on the outmost side, on the strength side of the formation. And then our X is on the back side. 28 power, again, 2 is our running back position and 8 is the running hole. So he's going to be running through this hole between his 2 tight ends. But how this looks with a power running or a gap running scheme might be something like this. So our tackle is going to down block the defensive end on the end. Same with this center here and our right guard. Our right tackle and tight end might do a combo block. So they together will initially block this defensive end. Once one of them has him under control, the other will move up to the second layer and block this safety or a linebacker. But importantly, something that makes power runs different is we often have pulling guards. So this left guard will move all the way across the formation here, come through that 8 hole, and act as kind of a primary lead blocker for the running back. This is a really key distinction for this type of running. Left guards, of course, they're really effective at blocking. Tight ends are more effective at blocking than receivers are, but left guards, it's their primary job. It's their primary skill set. So you're adding 2 pretty good blockers in our tight ends onto the field, and then we're also pulling this, one of our most effective blockers into the play as well. That's a huge run blocking advantage for the offense here. There's only so many defenders that they're going to have to block on this side of the field. Of course, these linebackers can try and move over and the safeties can come in, but they might be too far out of the play to really make a difference. One of the great things about this personnel package and having more tight ends on the field is that it forces the defense to consider using a base defense instead of nickel. That's what we're seeing here. We're seeing 1, 2, and 3 linebackers and 1, 2, 3, 4 linemen. So this is a 4-3 defense. So a typical defense will remove one of these linebackers, replace him with that nickel corner, the guy who's faster, speedier, better against passing. And they've replaced him with this linebacker instead, who's more effective against the run. So the defense is being forced to consider that because we've got more tight ends. These tight ends are bigger, they're stronger. And if the offense starts running the ball and the defense is caught having a nickel corner out here, one of these tight ends is going to have a much higher chance of blocking that guy than he is against this linebacker who's stronger. That's why it's kind of forcing the defense to consider reverting to their base defense. So strategically, this is beneficial for the offense because it now creates an opportunity for the offense to pass. And even though these tight ends are effective at blocking, and they're not as effective as being a deep passing threat as a receiver might be, they are still athletic and pass catchers. So if the offense does decide to throw the ball, we're likely going to have one of these linebackers be matched up in coverage against our tight end. That might be a favorable matchup that the offense likes. The alternative is that we instead have a nickel corner lined up against a receiver, which this still could be a good matchup if we have a really strong receiver. But we've already got two receivers. Think about the Rams. We've got our two best receivers in Puka and Adams already on the field. So now we're going to our third string receiver. He's obviously a talented receiver. He's in the NFL. But this matchup between him and the nickel corner might not be as strong as it is against between the tight end and this linebacker. It also creates more of an opportunity for the offense to do play action. So that's what we were showing before, where we have a fake run and the quarterback could either fake run and bootleg out, or they could just do fake run and the quarterback could just hand off and then just stand in the pocket. So the reason it's more effective is because with more tight ends on the field, it's a more credible threat. It's more likely or believable that the offense is actually going to run the ball. And so when they do a fake run this way, you might catch the linebackers and safeties kind of like anticipating or moving in advance to stop the run, which is going to create some open space behind them. It's going to make them hesitate and, not have as much kind of confidence in what play the offense is calling. And so that's where these play action plays create some open space and opportunity for the passing game. Also, the quarterback protection in passing is improved if the offensive line needs some help. So of course we've got our 5 offensive linemen, but tight ends are pretty effective, more effective than receivers at blocking. We also have a running back in here. So this would, of course, remove the amount of receivers that are running routes down the field, but it increases the amount of protection that the quarterback has if, for example, the defense is having a really easy time getting to the quarterback. So when is 12 personnel effective? It's most effective against light boxes. So what we're looking at here is we've got 1, 2, 3, 4 defensive linemen, and in the box, we've got 1, 2, and 3 players. We have a linebacker that's just outside the box, but technically we have 7 players in the box here. So this is pretty balanced. It's good against both passing and running. But when the offense has an extra couple run blockers on the field, this creates a pretty good advantage for the offense when it comes to running the ball. Of course, this linebacker here, he's pretty close to the play, right? So it's not as if he's not effective at all. But just generally speaking, what we're seeing in this example is a pretty advantageous blocking situation for the offense. It's also effective when you have physically imposing tight ends like George Kittle, who's good at both blocking and catching. The defense is going to be maybe a little bit less likely to, bite on runs because they know that this tight end here, Kittle, has the potential to, run routes effectively. He's got good hands. He can go up and make a play. So they have to respect that. So they might be a little bit more conservative in how they're attacking the run. On the other hand, if your tight end is known as only being a good blocker, the defense might be able to sell out on the run because they know that the likelihood of that tight end even getting an opportunity to catch the ball is a lot less likely. They can look at tape and see, what's the percentage of plays where he's actually getting targets. So they can take kind of a calculated risk and sell out on the run. But that could create an opportunity for the offense as well if they can anticipate that happening. In fact, in a recent video, I used the Ravens tight end Charlie Kolar as an example of someone who's known for blocking and not receiving. In fact, at the time, he had 2 career receiving touchdowns. He was known as being a blocker. He was actually on the field for a significant amount of the snaps. Well, since publishing that video, he's caught a touchdown in each of his last 2 games, which has doubled his career total, and might serve as evidence that defenses underestimated his role as a pass catcher. Another way that 12 personnel is effective is for play action, and specifically for quarterbacks who excel at play action. Now, all quarterbacks in the NFL have skill set to run play action passes, of course, but some are stronger at it than others. What does that mean? Well, play action typically happens out of the center when the quarterback is lined up right under center as opposed to being lined up in a shotgun position. The reason is because it's more believable when they're trying to sell the defense on a run play. The quarterback takes the snap, he takes a couple steps backwards, pretends to hand the ball off to the running back who is now running this way. It takes half a second to do. While that's happening, the offensive line is acting as if they're doing kind of a run blocking scheme. So it's a more believable way to make the defense think you're running than when you start in a shotgun. Some quarterbacks are better under center than they are from shotgun. Some quarterbacks operate plays mostly out of shotgun. The Buffalo Bills are an example of this. The Arizona Cardinals with Kyler Murray, especially when they were in the air raid offense under coach Cliff Kingsbury. You see a lot of quarterbacks coming out of college. They do mostly shotgun in certain situations. If a team in the NFL does a lot of play action and play calling under center, they might avoid looking at a quarterback like that because he doesn't fit their scheme. Play action quarterbacks also have to be very quick processors. Why? Because when they snap the ball, they're now running backwards. They're facing backwards. They're not even looking at what the defense is doing. Does a fake handoff, then he's either going to bootleg out or he might just stand in the pocket and turn around. Now he's got to quickly look at the defense and understand what has happened since he was facing that side of the field. He needs to be able to process that information quickly. Some quarterbacks are better at that than others. He needs to be able to accurately throw the ball while on the run if they do a lot of bootleg plays, which is common for play action schemes. When you're running, especially if you're running out to your opposite hand, if you're a right-handed quarterback and you're running out to the left, just think about that. Throwing the ball kind of across your body, it's a really contorted and difficult thing to do. It's a lot easier to throw the ball on the move as a right-handed passer if you're rolling out to the right. But in both scenarios, it's more difficult than if you're just standing still with clean footwork and can step into the pass. I think this might be one of the reasons that Kirk Cousins struggled since being traded from the Vikings to the Falcons. The Vikings are among the teams that use play action the most, while the Falcons are the team that use it the least, in 2024 at least. Many people consider play action bootlegs to be an important aspect of Kirk's skill set. So maybe it's not a surprise that moving to the Falcons' different passing scheme with less play action is a reason that he saw a drop-off in performance last year. Okay, so these are the 5 teams that use 12 personnel the most, the Falcons being number 1. These are the teams that use it the least. The reason the Falcons use 12 personnel so much is because Bijan Robinson is one of the league's top running backs. 12 personnel gives them a good chance to maximize his opportunity and really leverage his strength on the roster. That's reflected in his stats. He had an insane 2024. Kyle Pitts, their tight end, has long been considered an elite physical talent. He's 6'6", 250 pounds. He's effective at both blocking and receiving. He underperformed after a great rookie season, but he's having a pretty good start to the 2025 season through the first few games here. But he's definitely effective at run blocking rather, and is an important piece to their 12 personnel package. Lastly, their right tackle, Elijah Wilkinson, is ranked number 50 out of 77 right tackles this year by Pro Football Focus. So you might consider this a bit of a weakness on their offensive line. It's another reason why you'd consider adding more tight ends, either 11 personnel or certainly 12 personnel. With 12 personnel, you can get one of your tight ends out running routes. Maybe that's Kyle Pitts. And you'd have your other tight end stay in for blocking. So it's just adding extra protection to make sure your quarterback doesn't get sacked. This is also useful because they have a first-year quarterback in Michael Penix, or first year starting, so it gives him more time to process and more time to succeed. Also, the Falcons' wide receiver depth is pretty thin compared to most NFL teams. Their top 2 receivers are Drake London and Darnell Mooney. Very different compared to the Rams with Puka and Adams. So if they use 11 personnel, it means that these 2 receivers and then a third string receiver are all on the field, which is a bit of a weakness against many of the NFL's elite and talented defensive fronts. 12 personnel removes one of those receivers, adds a tight end, which could limit that weakness on their roster a little bit. What's more interesting to me, though, is why the Bills use 12 personnel so little. Now, the Bills have a really unique scheme. Their personnel usage is counterintuitive to what you'd expect them to do. They only use 12 personnel 6% of the time, compared to 24%, which is the league's average. It's the lowest of any team in the league. This, combined with the fact that Josh Allen, who is known as an elite passer with a big arm, would make you think that they don't run the ball much at all. However, they run the ball more than any team in the league. In fact, they're the only team this year that's called more rushing plays than passing plays. Only just barely, but still. Now, this is unexpected to me because teams that run the ball tend to use a lot of 12 personnel because of the extra blocking tight end. But here's how the Bills make this work without extra tight ends. They choose to use a spread offensive scheme that takes advantages of Allen's arm strength, mobility, and quick reading. And this spread system creates running opportunities in a less common way than teams who use power runs like we saw before with heavy personnel packages. The Bills call plays out of shotgun, where Allen is lined up 5 to 7 yards behind the center with 11 personnel. So James Cook, their running back, and then one tight end. The receivers are lined up wide, close to the numbers on the field. You've got like the 30, 20, and then in the slot. You will see some inline, like the tight end here. But generally speaking, they're lined up wide across the entire field instead of tight in close proximity to the ball. That's why they call it spread. This forces the defense to also line up wider than usual. The cornerbacks, of course, have to line up out with the receivers, or else it's going to create a pretty easy completion. And so what this does is it makes it a little bit more clear pre-snap to Josh Allen what coverage they might be using. And this is reason number one that the Bills do this. It puts the success of the play on Allen's shoulders to make a quick and correct read post-snap, at least when they're passing. With 11 personnel, the defense is almost always going to play nickel coverage, which is what we're seeing here with this nickel corner. An extra corner instead of a linebacker. And because of the spread of the formation, he's also almost always going to be lined up outside of our box. This means the box is often light for the Bills. In this case, we have a pretty wide lineup with our line here, 4 linemen. And then we have our 5th and 6th linebackers, so 6 men in the box. This is definitely considered a light box. So this is advantageous to run against because there's fewer big bodies to tackle the runner. James Cook, their running back, thrives with shotgun zone runs. So this is what makes them so different. If his offensive linemen make their blocks, and if he can find a hole and get to the second level, then there's only 2 linebackers, so one missed tackle could be a pretty big run opportunity. Let's take a look at a play call. This might be called gun doubles left, 27 power. So gun, we're lined up in the shotgun. Doubles left, so double is a 2x2 formation. So we've got 1-2 receivers here on the left and 1-2 on the right. Left means that the strength of the formation is on the left side. That's usually the side with the tight end, which is what we're seeing here. Depends on the team. Sometimes they do it the opposite, where the tight end will line up in line on the opposite side. But let's assume that guns double left is what we're seeing here. 27 power, just like we saw before. 2 is our running back, and his running hole is the 1, 3, 5, 7 hole. So he's doing an outside zone run here. Sorry, power run. So 27 power. Like we saw with the previous power run, we're going to have this right guard pull to the outside here, act as a lead blocker. We'll have a down block here, a down block here, either a combo block here, or even just a double team block where neither of them will advance to the second level. They might just both hold onto this defensive tackle. Our tight end might actually come up here and block either the strong safety or this linebacker, leaving this defensive end kind of wide open. But as he rushes, that's the responsibility of this right guard. And now we have James Cook coming over here with what looks to be like a lot of open running space. So this same advantage is true for Josh Allen as well, who runs a lot of designed quarterback runs. In fact, Allen has the second most rushing attempts this year behind Jalen Hurts. He averages about 7 per game, which is significant. Typically, Jaden Daniels and Lamar will have more designed runs, and Allen will be number 4 in terms of the most. But with Lamar and Daniels being hurt this year, Allen's moved up to number 2. So the reason the Bills don't use 12 personnel is because they have a different philosophy for running the ball and choose to line up in spread formations. 21 personnel. This is where we've got 2 running backs and 1 tight end. You'll often see this with unique formations, such as the I formation, where our quarterback is lined up under center with 2 running backs behind him, usually with the halfback being kind of like 7 yards behind him in depth. And then the other running back might be directly behind or offset to one of the sides. It allows the offense to use, if they want to, 7 or 8 man protection if needed. We've got our 5 offensive linemen and then 3 extra potential blockers. This is the same when we had 2 tight ends and 1 running back. However, with an extra running back, they're lined up in the backfield. They're a little bit more versatile for blitzing threats. So for example, with this tight end here, we had another one over here, but then the defense ended up having extra pressure come around on this left side. There's not a whole lot that these tight ends on the right can do. But by having a running back in the backfield, he's going to be able to kind of scan the pressure from either side of the field and potentially pick up pressure. You'll often see this used for a lot of power runs like we saw before. In fact, this might be more common because teams like to include a lead blocker as from a running back position in the backfield instead of just having a pulling guard like we saw before. So this running back will also come through the hole, and then this one will receive the ball. But 21 personnel, despite its appearance of being a very effective run personnel, can also be used for deep shots. So let's take a look at a play call example. This one might be called something like I right slot, Z post, X dig, max protect, play action. So let's break this down. We've got I, which refers to this I formation, right, which refers to the right side of the field being the strength of our formation. That's where our tight end, our running back line up. Also instructs our Z receiver to line up here and our X to be over here. Slot refers to our Z receiver. Instead of being lined up on the perimeter, he's actually going to be lined up a little bit more tight in this slot location. So that's I right slot. Z post, X dig instruct the receivers what they're going to do, what their routes are. Now, sometimes offenses will use a single term to describe a concept like stick, for example, which would instruct multiple receivers of what their routes should be. But you can also individually tag receivers with their identifier. So in this case, we've got Z post and X dig. So our Z receiver is being told to run this deep post, and our X is going to run this dig route. Max protect refers to either 7 or 8 blockers, depending on the depending on how the offense is coached. So of course we've got our 5 linemen, and in this case, all of the remaining 3 players are going to be in some kind of block protection. And then play action. So our running back's going to run, our quarterback's going to give him a fake handoff, turn around, and look for either the X or Z receiver. But we're calling this a deep shot, meaning it's the offense trying to make a completion deep down the field. Maybe it's second and short, or there are other special circumstances during the game where it would be advantageous to call a deep shot. Situations where the defense is expecting the offense to run. That's especially a good case where this would be effective because we've got this formation that is pretty well suited for a running play. So it's really believable that the offense is going to run it. So if the defense has high believability that this is going to be a run, they're going to be more likely to bite on that run and bite on that play action especially, which could create opportunity for these passing concepts to come open. The reason that they're calling max protect is because with a deep shot, this dig route is likely going to be 12 to 15 yards down the field before he makes this break. That's going to take time for him to get there. And then this deep post, of course, this receiver's likely the key area where he's going to be open might be deep down the middle. That's going to take time as well. So the quarterback needs patience and needs to allow these receivers more time to get to those spots. And of course, if we only have 5 blockers, and if the defense sends any pressure, or if they don't send any pressure at all, and one of the defenders wins their block, then the quarterback's just not going to have time to find his receiver. So by having max protection, we've got extra blockers in here. It just increases the likelihood that those plays can develop. So it can be used in very similar ways to 12 personnel with 2 tight ends, like we just looked at. But 12 personnel has a lot more passing game potential because, of course, the tight ends are, usually more effective at passing, at receiving rather, than our running backs. And they're lined up closer to the line of scrimmage. So they're just in better position for downfield completions. Running backs, of course, can catch out of the backfield. They can also have routes that develop downfield. So it's not as if you can't do some of the same things, but it's definitely less of a threat to pass the ball. As a result of that, because it's a little bit more run heavy, it further encourages the defense to switch from nickel into their base 3-4 or 4-3 fronts. That's why these deep shot opportunities could be advantageous, although in this case, they're not really taking advantage of the reduced pass protection because we're not really utilizing all of our passing threats on that particular play example. Only 2 of the receivers are having routes. So in order to do that, you'd probably utilize, probably 3 or 4 of your passing options. However, with fewer defensive backs on the field, the offense might find more opportunities to isolate their best receiver in a favorable matchup. So typically that's the X receiver, the one that lines up on the backside of our play side strength. Usually this is the offense's most talented receiver, and he's often matched up against the defense's most talented cover corner. Not all the time, but that typically is the case. They're often lined up on the line of scrimmage, which means they can't motion. Usually the Z, who we call the flanker in some cases, will be lined up off the line of scrimmage, and he'll be the one that you'll see doing a lot of the motion. But due to the kind of attention, usually a heavier box will have a kind of a more focus on the run game. So it's more likely that we'll get a one-on-one matchup here. So of course, that's no guarantee that there's going to be a completion, but if the offense likes their matchup between their receiver and the defense's corner, this could be a good personnel package to try and leverage that. Examples of X receivers will be somebody like Jamar Chase, CeeDee Lamb, Devontae Adams, talented receivers who can go up and win these one-on-one battles. Now, they're not necessarily going to play that X position on every play, but they tend to do it a lot of the time, especially in key moments. These are the teams that use 21 personnel the most. And if you notice, it's interesting that the Dolphins with McDaniels and the 49ers with Shanahan use it significantly more than most teams. They use motions and shifts on almost every play. And as we saw before with the Rams, many of their plays look the same or very similar formations, which allows them to use sneaky and unexpected plays in key moments. Let's take a look at another example here from the Dolphins. So I found a couple actual play examples from one of their recent games. I meant to find examples from 21 personnel, but I accidentally found some using 12 personnel. But we'll see the same concept here using the same formation. So this first one might be something like pistols, trips left, Z fly motion, flood. Let's break this down. So first of all, pistol refers to the location our quarterback is lined up. So he's not under center and he's not in shotgun, which would be a little bit further back. This pistol formation, he's lined up about 4 yards behind the center. It's not used quite as often, but it is used quite a bit. Trips left, we've got our 3 receivers lined up here with 1 on the right. Z fly motion, so our Z receiver is going to motion over before the snap onto the right side of the field. So now we're actually lined up in kind of this 2x2, doubles formation. And then flood describes the concept. When that motion happens, this is what it might look like pre-snap. Notice where the defenders are lined up, shifted more toward the left side of the field. After the motion, the defense might look something like this. And so what's happened is that linebacker here, who was lined up in front of the receiver, he didn't follow the receiver all the way across the field, which you would expect to see in a man coverage situation. What happened was, this linebacker just shifted a bit to the right. This one shifted to the right. They all just kind of shifted and bumped a little bit toward the right side of the field where the motion was happening. That's important because it indicates that the defense is likely playing some kind of zone coverage. Tua can also see that there's one safety that's showing high, which could indicate that they're playing either a cover 3 or maybe a cover 1. Cover 3 would be more common. There's no guarantee that this is the case, but it's a pretty good chance that that's happening. This is important because he can start to diagnose or think about where he might be looking to throw the ball post-snap. If he has a play called that is not effective against cover 3, he could alert to a second play that was called in the huddle. He could maybe call an audible to change the play, or sometimes a play might have different passing routes that one might be good against cover 2, another one might be better against cover 3. So he can kind of like prioritize the one that is effective against cover 3 as his first look. This flood concept describes the routes the receivers will run, which could look something like this. It depends on the team. They're going to have different types of route combinations, but this could be kind of the default flood concept that the Dolphins are coached. We've got this sail route, we've got this in route, and we've got this dig route. And if we were correct with this being cover 3, then the defense will likely have this deep defender playing in the center, and the cornerbacks will be playing in the other thirds. That's their responsibility. Now, they'll have all sorts of rules where, for example, if this receiver doesn't run deep, then this cornerback might actually change his responsibility and play in that flat and cover him. But, if this receiver actually does run this sail route deep, then that cornerback is almost certainly going to follow him. The flood concept is designed to beat cover 3. And what it means is you're flooding one side of the field with, 3 or more receivers. So in this case, this would take a little bit of time to develop because these receivers are coming across the field. But we've got this tight end coming at kind of this shallower depth, and the dig route is coming at kind of intermediate depth. And then that sail route is a little bit deeper. So what's going to happen is it's going to create conflict. There's not enough defenders who have responsibilities on that side of the field. This corner is likely going to play that deep coverage against the sail. This linebacker, he might have kind of this, curl route or hook route responsibility. But as he sees this tight end coming across the field, he might try and stick with him. But then this dig route might be the opportunity for the quarterback. It might come open right here. There's no real obvious person to cover him. That is kind of the purpose and why flood concepts are effective against cover 3. What ends up happening in this play is Tua finds this sail route and he throws incomplete on the sideline right over here Typically, you wouldn't expect that to be the primary route. Usually that's just kind of the decoy, not the decoy, but like it's forcing the cornerback out of the play. And then the other concepts underneath are usually the ones that come open. The pass itself was reasonably good. It was incomplete, but pretty insignificant play result. So this was called, I think, in the first quarter of one of their games. Later on, a couple plays, or a couple drives later, they called another play that looked something like this. So they came out in, again, 12 personnel, and they lined up in this 2x2 formation. So this is not exactly the same as we saw before. In the last one, our tight ends were lined up in line. And in this case, the Z was not motioning across the field. Tua was again lined up in pistol. And we do have this 2x2 formation in the same personnel package. So it is a very similar style of formation that the offense is showing. Now, why is this important? Well, it can kind of confuse the defense. Like it's more difficult for them to predict what the offense is going to do. They already saw them do this kind of deep shot type concept where they attacked the sideline. Of course, there's no guarantee the offense is going to do that again, but the defense doesn't know for sure what they're going to do. So it keeps them on their toes. From the offense's perspective, again, they don't know with certainty, but they're seeing this single high safety look again. The defense is often coached to play certain types of base coverage with certain rules against certain kind of formation. So if they see this pistol, which is not all that common to see, and they see the same personnel package, same formation with 2x2, it's possible that the defense is going to play a similar type of coverage. So in knowing this, the offense can call a play that exploits, again, what they saw from that first play. So if they assume that this is cover 3, and they are correct, we're going to again have these deep third coverages. And one of the vulnerabilities is in this flat, because this linebacker has to come all the way over here to make a play. This cornerback is going to be completely out of the play because he'll be playing deep coverage against this receiver, which doesn't really leave a whole lot of defenders to stop something happening over here. So the play that the offense calls here would be something like pistols, doubles right, U motion, zone left. So again, we're pistol, doubles right. So we've got the 2x2. U motion. So in this case, our second tight end we're labeling as U. So the type of motion, he's doing one of these kind of things and coming out and blocking. And then this zone left run. So it might be more specifically something like a 27 zone. So 2 and then the 7 holes over here. So he's running out this way. So the reason this is good is because it's attacking that flat weakness of cover 3. And what the blocking might look like is, of course, this receiver might just run deep to try and clear that cornerback. And if he at any point attempts to come in for a block, that receiver be expected to block him. We've got the U tight end here who's going to make a block on the end for anybody coming in. He might even just like block this D end if he gets past our left tackle. But generally speaking, we can see that there's quite a bit of space over here. So this ended up being a pretty successful run for about 8 yards. So it's a good example of 2 plays that were actually called out of very similar formations using the same personnel packages to illustrate the strategy and the thought that goes into why coaches like McDaniel call these plays. And here are the teams that use 21 the least, 13 personnel. This is where we have 1 running back and 3 tight ends. It's a really heavy formation. As you can expect, this maximizes size and blocking for physical power running concepts. Heavy play action use due to the credible running threat. Of course, with all this run blocking talent, it's very believable to the defense that the offense is going to run, which is going to create options for play action and bootleg passing, which is why we might see things like tight end leaks, seams, and crossers. So let's take a look at a couple of those examples. So we've talked about bootlegs, where the quarterback rolls out to one side of the field. And typically with bootleg passes, you'll see the quarterback throw and, or rather you'll see the receivers run toward, that side of the field. So they're kind of running in momentum with the quarterback. It makes it easier for him to throw, kind of where the receiver is running towards. That's most common for kind of a typical bootleg. A leak is a different type of bootleg where if the quarterback is rolling out to the left, he's going to be throwing all the way across the field to somebody else who's coming out over here. So it's kind of like this extra layer of disguise. The bootleg itself is already faking a run, running out and actually passing. But then an extra kind of layer is the defense now thinks, okay, they're probably going to be throwing over on this side of the field. Nope, we're actually throwing over to this side of the field. So it's just extra deception, and you can find some real opportunities with really smart play calls. So in this case, this tight end leak play could look something like this. We might have our, in this case, running a deep post across the middle. This tight end running, maybe kind of a quick, like a shallow crosser. This tight end over here might be running kind of like this, a block. And then for like 1 second, he'll block and then he'll go out into the flat. The quarterback will boot out to the left. And then importantly, this tight end will run this seam route. And this is the primary read. So in this case, we're seeing that the defense is showing this, single high safety. So of course, we don't know for sure what coverage they're playing, but this could indicate cover 1, cover 3. With this heavy look, maybe we are expecting more of like a cover 1 type scenario. Either way, let's imagine this is a cover 3. One of the weaknesses, another weakness, is in this seam area, this gap between. Again, we've got 3 defensive players that are covering a third of the field, and they need to be kind of in a position where they might cheat toward one side of the field where there is more of a passing strength. But generally speaking, they're going to be playing more even kind of a conservative central spot so that they have the ability to jump to one side or the other. So he's going to be kind of like in the center here, and same with this guy. He needs to protect the sideline, but also all the way up to kind of the hashes, or at least between the hashes and the numbers, which are kind of around here. So there's going to be naturally some open space in this seam. And so if the quarterback can time it correctly, and if the defense is not expecting it, when he rolls out this way, they're already kind of maybe a little bit unexpecting this bootleg to happen because of the fake run. And now they might be looking more toward this side of the field. So this seam could become especially open and kind of a vulnerable spot for the defense. That would be a tight end leak. Now you might also have something like a tight end crosser, which would be more of the kind of play where you're leveraging the side of the field that the quarterback is rolling out to. So this guy might be doing this kind of just like a fade. This tight end might be doing kind of a quick out. This is pretty common in the red zone, where you'll see, if this is kind of the goal line here, you'll see a tight end or a receiver just catching it, and the quarterback will throw it to a relatively safe spot right on the edge of the field here where only his guy can get it. But then you'll see this kind of deep crosser. So this is kind of like the most interesting and big reward part of this play is if this guy can get, behind this coverage. So again, if this is like, let's say a cover 3, this corner is going to follow this receiver deep, which could create an open space here. Even if this is cover 2, that's likely going to be a vulnerability. So there's a couple different options there for the quarterback rolling out. The roster talent of a team is really going to depend on how much they run 13 personnel. If they have a lot of athletic tight ends that can outrun linebackers, then you might see a lot of 13 personnel usage, especially for passing game. It's still going to be a pretty small percentage, 5 to 10% of plays, are going to be kind of called out of 13. But another good thing about this is that the offense still has the ability to switch between tight and spread look combinations. So we're looking at more of a tight formation where we've got this tight end who's lined up right next to the right tackle. This tight end also is right kind of behind that other one. This would be tight. It's in close proximity to where the ball is. Whereas the spread look would be, if he maybe lined up here and then this other one lined up in the slot, that'd be spread, right? So you've got the ability to do that because your tight ends, if they can catch the ball effectively, you've got those options. Defenses typically respond by stacking the box with 8 or 9 defenders. So we're seeing that here. We've got 4 down linemen and then another 4 in the box. So this is a pretty stacked box. 8's pretty heavy. And then we have, our cornerback here who's just outside. So definitely protecting against the run. These are the teams that use 13 personnel the most, and these are the teams that use it the least. I was curious in looking at this, why do the Steelers use 13 personnel so much? It's interesting because they used 11 personnel 70% of the time in 2023, and then that dropped to 51% in 2024. And now in 2025, only 27% of their plays use 11 personnel. So that's a significant drop. That's not just a few percentage points. That's a complete shift in their offensive scheme. So why did this happen? Well, the answer is their offensive coordinator, Arthur Smith. He joined the team last year in 2024 from the Falcons, and his coaching philosophy for the offense is to use multiple tight ends. He's a big tight ends guy. Heavy use of zone running schemes to open up play action passing. That's kind of, in a nutshell, what he likes to do. The Steelers also have a pretty athletic and agile O-line, which is effective for Arthur's zone blocking scheme, where they have to move laterally. And their tight ends, Freiermuth and Washington, they're both considered pretty strong blocking tight ends. So it's really, really good for this type of scheme. So what they did over the last few years was they replaced their play calls with heavy tight end usage, which is now why they're ranked number 4th in terms of their 12 personnel usage and number 1 in their 13 personnel usage.